Hello, everyone. My name is Rabbi Herschel Hartz, and I'm the Assistant Director for the Office of Student Life at Yeshiva University's Wilf campus. Thank you. We are incredibly proud to welcome you all to what we hope will become the first annual official Yeshiva University visit to the Lubavitcher Rebbe's Ohel. This special program is due to the hard work of so many people. We're especially thankful to student leaders of both Chabad clubs at both campuses, especially, we're pointing at Eliyahu Solomon right over here. So Eliyahu Solomon, Gabe Goralnik, Chana Libero, and Freda Lane. Rafi Kapitanker was our graphic design specialist for our flyer, and a special shout out to the print house and the Lane family for printing the Sicha booklets you all will go home with tonight, and to Rabbi Shmuley Afson at Sichos in English for helping with the production of these booklets. Financial support was provided for this event by Yeshiva University's Office of Student Life in conjunction with our student leaders at Student Organization of Yeshiva on the Wilf campus and Torah Activities Council on the Barron campus. You can applause. We're also thankful to private donors who made this event a possibility, including Daniel and Tzipora Lorch, Max Cohen, Yitzhak and Rachi Kamen, and Eitan and Shelby Bash and families. We're also incredibly proud to have our lineup of speakers. Professor Rabinovich is on her way, but we're incredibly proud to have our lineup of speakers, and we're thankful for them volunteering today to speak. From the start, the biggest supporters of this event were Rabbi Matti Seligson. Where's Matti? Matti's in the back. He's always in the background, not getting the support he deserves, but whatever. I'm joking. That was a joke. He's Director of Media Relations at Chabad.org, and Rabbi Ephraim Mintz, one of our presenters today. They helped us secure this special location with the help of Rabbi Abba Refson, Director of the Ohel Chabad Lubavitch. We are forever grateful. Thank you very much. So let's begin. Why are we here? What is the goal of this program? Throughout the past couple of parshios, we have been introduced to the characters that are our holy avos and imahos. One of those essential figures in Jewish history is Yitzhak Avinu. Very little is said about him in the Chumash and his growth as a figure in the Torah, except for one essential fact about him. He dug wells. What is so important about digging a well? A well has hidden water that no one can see, not even the person who decides to take the risk and the effort to dig. There is literally no modern day figure in Jewish history, maybe ever, that has dug into the soul of so many Jews and revealed the hidden potential within them like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We will see this highlighted by the story of a student at Cambridge University who had no intention of becoming a rabbinic figure and who later came to be a leader of British Jewry because of the Rebbe's encouragement, the story of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. And Rabbi Blech is here today to tell about his connection to the Rebbe and the Rebbe's efforts to send him to the Far East to represent Chabad Lubavitch, a regular modern Orthodox rabbi with no beard, no Lubavitcher garb, who became a chassid in camouflage. The Rebbe's reach to this day is far and wide. And the reason that we see that influence throughout the entire Jewish world is because the Rebbe saw not people as they were. He revealed potential in them that no one else saw, and instead saw what could be. This event is about you, and you, and you, each and every single one of you. This event is about realizing your responsibility to service a greater cause than yourselves and your personal interests, and that you have incredible abilities, unseen potential to service our people, the Jewish people. This event is about how each one of you has the ability to literally change worlds. The Rebbe would not just demand rote action either. Our actions, when infused with the purpose that it can change the world, will trigger a nuclear reaction that literally changes worlds. Our homes, our families, our friends and colleagues, and our communities. Coming to the Ohel reminds us and refocuses us to get back on track to this all-important mission to help bring Mashiach. Whether it is in the office place, or when traveling through the social media world, or in a Jewish nonprofit, or when on the street, or even on the subway, all of us in this room, whether we are in Yeshiva now or alumni, have an ability and a responsibility to spread the Jewish message of love, truth, kindness, gratitude, respect for others, and a desire for a messianic redemption that brings us the peace and godliness we all paying for, anywhere and everywhere, and at any time, quite literally. We must be so proud of our Jewish values that they seep out of us, that they are literally seen on our faces. So together, I hope we come out of here with one fundamental message. Me, yes, me. I can do it. I have infinite potential. I can change the world. One conversation with one Jew can send reverberations that we may never see, but it is our responsibility and ability all the same. It is you who this event is about. A widely admired and inspirational teacher and guide, Rabbi Judah Michel is executive director of Camp HASC, the Hebrew Academy for Special Children, the Jewish community's premier summer program for individuals with special needs. He also founded Sama Nafshi, an organization dedicated to fostering Jewish education and inspiration, committed to working to connect Jews with their heritage and each other. Rabbi Michel studied at Yeshivat Shalavim and Yeshiva University and earned a BA in history from Yeshiva University, a master's in education from Azrieli Graduate School, and a graduate fellow at the CUNY Center for Coexistence at the School for Public Affairs. Rav Judah and his wife, Ora, live in Ramat Beit Shemesh with their 8 children. We are incredibly honored to have with us today Rabbi Judah Michel.
Thank you, Rav Herschel. Thank you, my hearts. Thank you, everyone. What an unbelievable privilege to be here. Shechianu v'kimanu v'gyanu l'zman hazeh. It's very, very special. The Gemara tells us that when we're a guest somewhere, when we're visiting somewhere, poschin b'chvod achsanya, that we begin by showing respect and expressing appreciation to our host, to say something in their honor. You need the Gemara to tell us something which is intuitive. We need the Talmud to tell us something which is menschlich, it's normal midos, it's appropriate, it's civics. I mean, you come to somebody's house, you come to somebody's place, you should thank them for having you. Poschen b'chavod achsanya, beginning by recognizing one's host, so reminds us that we're all being hosted. That every one of us, including the host, is also being hosted by the host of all hosts, the Ribono Shel Olam. The whole world is his place. It humbles us. But I want to thank the Rebbe for having us today. I want to thank Yeshiva University for bringing us together here at the Ohel. I don't know that in my life I ever thought that I would say that. I'd like to thank my teachers at Yeshiva University who didn't always give a hard time when I'd be missing classes hanging out at the Ohel. Still figured out a way to graduate. And Birshus, Rabbi Mintz, Rabbi Blech, teachers, friends. The Alter Rebbe says that when we think that when 10 Jews come together to daven or to learn, we come together to perform a chesed or some act of holiness, so then we create Hashras HaShechina, the divine presence dwells with us. The Alter Rebbe said that when 10 Jews come together, just together, it creates such a powerful force. This is a very powerful force, and this is a very special gathering. I'm so appreciative to be able to be a part. So Chazal also say that when you go somewhere to speak, you just to open up with it, say a little something in the beginning to open people. I'll tell you a joke. Now, I don't be presumptuous. The joke was going around a little bit on WhatsApp recently. Rav Weinberger, one of my mentors, one of my teachers, who also spends time here at the Ohel, who was also influenced greatly by the Rebbe. I mean, anyone today who's striving, who's growing, who's seeking connection, who's in the world of Yiddishkeit, is the story is being written on the canvas that the Rebbe prepared for us. Rav Weinberger said this is going around for Moshe Weinberger, but I heard a little bit of a different girsa. Divrei Harav, Divrei Talmud, but Birshus, I'll tell the girsa the way I heard it. There were a couple guys found themselves in Gehenna. There were 3 guys who found themselves in hell. They turned to each other and said, what are we doing here? Jewish guys, we're good, we're decent, I don't know, we did what we did in the world, we made some mistakes, we kind of made some wrong turns, but I mean, this really isn't a place for a good Jewish boy. How are we going to get out of this place? How are we going to get out of here? We got to get the heck out of here, right? It's not a place for us. So one was a Breslover, one was like a guy who learned in like a real yeshivish place, and the other was a Chabadsker, a Lubavitcher. So they're looking at each other, how are we going to get out of this? It's the Breslover. He remembers, Rabbi Nachman made a promise. Rabbeinu made a promise that if you come to Uman on Rosh Hashanah and say Tikkun Klali and give a kopek, give a pruta by the Tzion, by Rabbi Nachman's gravesite, so then Rabbi Nachman will even pull you out of Gehenna, will pull you out of hell by your payas. So he's like, oh right, I have this. This is my get out of jail free card. So he calls out Rabbeinu. And a hand comes down from the upper worlds. Rabbi Nachman peeks his head out and he says, yep. This is my guy. And he grabs him by his payas, and pulls him out of Gehenna. Now you got these other 2 guys there. You got the yeshivish guy, learned in like a classic yeshiva, and Lubavitcher. Now this yeshivish guy, he says, okay, I also had Rebbeim. So he calls out, Rebbe. And he sees his like Rebbe from high school peek his head out there from the upper worlds, and he says, yeah. He goes, Rebbe, I'm in hell. I'm in Gehenna. Could you help me get me out of here? The Rebbe said, I told you were going to end up there. He said, I know, I'm here. He says, no, I told you were going to Gehenna, all the things. I said, I know, but Rebbe, can you please do me a favor? Can you help me? He says, if you promise to learn this amount of blot, this amount of, and then I'll in the next Gilgal, in your next iteration, I'll help you. He says, I'll do anything. Please just give me a chance. The Rebbe says, okay, fine. He schleps him out and brings him back to the base madrash. So he got this Chabadsker there, and he's like, okay, I see who this is. He goes, Rebbe, and he calls out to Lubavitcher Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe peeks out from the upper worlds. He says, yeah. He says, Rebbe, I'm Gehenna. Can you help me? And the Rebbe reaches his hand down into the lowest pits of hell, hands him a $1 bill, and says, Bracha v'hatzlacha, good luck on your shlichus. The Rebbe was the Tzaddik Hador, the Nasi Hador. He was the individual who more than anyone else took responsibility for a generation, for the world. For sure, for those who were in the community of Crown Heights, families, students of Chabad institutions, and for sure was the commander-in-chief of an army that spread throughout the world and continues to spread throughout the world, to bring light and Yiddishkeit to every Jew and every person on planet Earth. He was the CEO of that. He was the commander-in-chief of that. But it wasn't just of the Lubavitch community. It was the entire Jewish community. Every Jew ba'asher hu sham. Every woman, every child, every man in Klal Yisrael. And by extension, the entire world. The Rebbe was a Talmud Chacham. He was of the greatest in generations in his chidushim, in his insights, in the revealed Torah and the concealed Torah. The corpus of knowledge, the corpus of information, of Torah insight that the Rebbe left into the world and put into the world, it's beyond measure, it's beyond proportion. It's deeper than the deepest seas. It's beyond measure in the highest places of heaven. And translated into English and French and Russian and basically every language on planet Earth in order to make it accessible. Besides for being a tzaddik and a nasi and a CEO and a commander-in-chief and being a righteous person who was a scholar, the Rebbe was a father figure. The Rebbe was someone who cared for every single individual that he met and didn't meet. Coming here to the Ohel, for me, is always a moving experience. But it's funny, you know. When we go places, whenever we go, like Yaakov Avinu, he was going from one place to the next. He didn't really know his destination. He was on his way. It says Vayetze Yaakov, Vayisa Yaakov es Raglav. Rashi tells us when he lifted up his feet and went, he was guided by his heart. Rashi says his heart took him to a certain place. He heard good news, he got a good piece of information that Hashem is with him, and his heart took him to where he had to go. As we're traveling, as we're going, we're trying to pick up that signal, that internal signal from our heart, that internal GPS or that Waze to kind of guide us where we're supposed to go. In life, to find direction, to make sense of life's big questions, to make sense of some of the challenges that we have in our faith, and to try to clarify exactly who are we, what do we believe, where do we go, what should we do, how do we make an impact. Our hearts today have guided us to the Ohel. And if our hearts are open, then we could pick up the Wi-Fi signal that's coming here very strong. You know, always looking for klita, and in Hebrew you say klita. You're always looking for connection. We're always looking that the bars on the phone should be full, so that we can download, so that we can connect, so that we can get the images quickly, so that we can be able to be in touch. And when it's open, when we're open, everywhere we go, you're picking up different signals. We're here in the headquarters of Chutz La'aretz. This is the central nucleus, the central spiritual nucleus of the world in Chutz La'aretz. The Wi-Fi signal that's coming here very strong for me, when my heart is open at the Ohel, is the Rebbe reaching out to me, saying, wherever you are, you have a purpose and you have a mission. And your purpose and your mission is to be a Baal Achrayis, is to take responsibility. And to know that I believe in you, the Rebbe is saying. And believe in yourself. And know that you can make an impact. Where that impact is, in what area of life, that we have to search within ourselves. Like Rabbi Hartz explained, that well water we have to schlep for ourselves. Our Sedra continues this epic showdown between Yaakov and Esav, brothers. That eternal struggle and internal struggle that we all feel between the gravitational pull of the physical world, of the material world, of the outside world, to our yearning for transcendence, for connection to beyond ourselves. Represented by Yaakov's dream of ups and downs, Olam v'yordim bo, the ladder which he saw was really himself. And in this week's parasha it continues. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav, and he sent forth malachim. He sent forth, what does it mean? Messengers or angels? Rashi says malachim mamish. Literally, he sent forth angels. And the Rebbe explained, what that means is that Yaakov Avinu, our forefather, Masa Avos, Simon Labanim, Ulabanos, Yaakov Avinu was putting into the ecosystem, putting into the atmosphere, putting into our DNA, into all of us. Malachim, a spiritual force, a power, to be able to always stand up against Esav in all of his forms, internal and external. Whether it's the Yetzer Hara schlepping us away from our purpose and goals in life, distracting us from who we want to be, to an outside force, the enemies of the world, the darkness in the world that seeks to snuff out our light. We know that the descendants of Esav, we're the descendants of Yaakov Avinu, were called after his name, Bnei Yisrael. The descendants of Esav, the Western world, and all the values that are represented by Esav, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire. We're in days of preparation for Yud Kislev, preparation for Hanukkah, these special days of Kislev. We're thinking about the enemies from those days. How did How did Matisyahu Banav, how did those Chashmonaim, how did the band, that small group of believers, how did they get the courage, the gall, the chutzpah, the faith to stand up against that entire Greek Seleucid empire? It didn't make sense for them to try to stand up. I mean, that revolution didn't make sense. It was irrational. Where did they get those kochos? Where did they summon the strength and the courage to stand up? The Rebbe explained that when Yaakov stands up to Esav and sends forth this spiritual force into the world, the Malachim Mamish, he sent forth Vayishlach, he sent forth that potential to continue that battle against all odds to his grandchildren, the Maccabees, the Chashmonaim, and all the way down to us. Antiochus made a Gzeros against the Jewish people. He said, you can learn Torah if you want, but don't think Torah is anything more special than your classes that you have in the afternoon, lahavdil. There's Torah, there's Mada, whatever. You can learn science, do physical education, art, music, and Torah. It's whatever, it's fine. It's all the same thing. Don't think there's anything different. Don't think that it's a Torah's Chaim. Don't think that it's the blueprint of the universe. Don't think that it makes you anything different than us. We're all the same. You're not chosen, you're not special. No. And Yaakov fought against that. And the Maccabees, the Chashmonaim fought against that. They said, no, there's light and there's darkness. There's us and there's them. And Antiochus made Gzeros against establishing Moed, saying that times are different and special. The whole gift of Rosh Chodesh, of renewal, of controlling time, of sanctifying time. Antiochus said, no Moed. Bris Milah, he made a law, Gzer against Bris Milah. Don't think that your body's different. You're an animal. You're just a person. You're flesh and blood, just like us. No, worship the body. No Bris Milah, there's nothing to perfect, there's nothing to improve. And Shabbos, you think that it's special. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, osi liolam. You think that this day of faith, this day of rest, this day of Yom HaNishmasa of the soul sets you apart and expresses the covenant with God. Forget that also. No Moed, no Milah, no Shabbos. How did the Chashmonaim have the koach to stand up? Because Yaakov Avinu sent forth into the world the koach of malachim, mamish, literally angels. And the Rebbe said, mamish are the letters of Moed, Milah, and Shabbos. He literally sent forth the ability for them to have the koach to stand up. And what Yaakov Avinu did for the Chashmonaim and does for us, the Rebbe continues that same trajectory, that same way. The Ohel is the Rebbe's resting site. It's the place where the Rebbe is buried. It's also the place from which the Rebbe continues to express himself in the world. Tzadikim b'mitasam nikrim chayim, untethered, without boundaries of time and space. And in the same way that Yaakov Avinu put forth into the world this force to charge his great-grandchildren, his descendants, to stand up against darkness, the Rebbe continues to send out a Wi-Fi signal, a message, that if our hearts are open, we can pick up, to take responsibility, and to stand up to whatever we face from the outside or internally, to know that we can. So many questions and issues and uncertainties in this world. This is a world of confusion. The Ohel is a place, and the Rebbe provided those answers. There's a ditch, and there's a pile of dirt. That's the way Achashverosh and Haman made a deal. There's a lack of clarity that we feel, and an empty place that we search to fill. You come to the Ohel, and we're open. We can receive the wind in our sails and the answers to so many of those questions. Hadracha, insight, inspiration. In Chabad, the language is, I don't come from a Lubavitch background. Kids don't go to Lubavitch schools. Kids go to Merkaz Harav schools. I'm a graduate of YU. And the Rebbe is the Rebbe. Rebbe stands for Rosh Bnei Yisrael. The Rebbe took responsibility for the Jewish people and for the entire world, us among them. I come here to get marching orders. In Chabad, they say there's not monuments to the Rebbe. There's not like, the presidential library or like plaques on the wall, because those things they're static, they don't move. In Chabad, there's not that language of the Rebbe's legacy. There's the Rebbe's marching orders. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. Yaakov didn't die. Yaakov continues to be iterated and expressed in all of his descendants and all of us. The Rebbe's, there's not a legacy. There's marching orders. There's continuous instructions to be inspired and inspire others. That if we know Aleph, teach Aleph. If we know Beis, to teach Beis. That if two Jews meet, a third should benefit. To make the world a better place. L'sakin olam, to fix the world. And come here to pick up that Wi-Fi signal, to renew that commitment. And to come in contact with the Rebbe, the Nasi, the guide, the father figure, the commander-in-chief, and to know that I'm part of that every single one of us is part of that. And to receive marching orders to go forward, and to reveal the ultimate goal and purpose of our lives, and bring about Mashiach Tzidkenu, Negula Ashleima V'Amitas, Meher B'Meinu, Mamish, for real.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Michel. Very inspiring words. We would like to invite Professor Rabinovich to join us on the podium in the front. It might be the one opportunity, Moshe, that we can take a picture, so maybe we might want to take a picture of all four of our speakers together. Our next speaker is a very special addition to our lineup today because, with no offense hopefully taken, the person who I'm about to introduce now has had a personal relationship with the Rebbe himself and was sent, as he'll tell you in his story, to several different Chabad houses to speak in the Far East. And the Rebbe, I think, coined the term, he called you a chassid in camouflage. Am I right, Rabbi Blech? Correct. We're very excited to have Rabbi Benjamin Blech, who's an internationally recognized educator, religious leader, author, and lecturer. Rabbi Blech is the author of 19 highly acclaimed and best-selling books with combined sales of close to 500,000 copies, including the international bestseller The Sistine Secrets, translated into 16 languages and transformed into a major documentary feature film. A 10th generation rabbi, that's a lot of generations, Rabbi Blech is a professor of Talmud at Yeshiva University, as well as Rabbi Emeritus of Young Israel of Oceanside. We are very pleased and blessed to have with us today Rabbi Benjamin Blech.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I want to tell you first, you all should be aware that we are in a holy place. More than that, when I came in and I saw the sign over here, I want to make an announcement. Mashiach is coming. Who would have believed Yeshiva University and Lubavitcher combining, respecting each other, understanding that we are one and the same, but that's the message of Lubavitcher. And that's the message that I want to bring you in a personal sense as well. Unfortunately, you already gave away the keynote to my address, because we all have different names. Even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even God who is one, is Hashem and Elokim and Shakai and so on. I have a lot of different names. I am Rabbi, I am Daddy, I am, to my wife, depends on the day. Everybody has different names. But I managed to get a title that is now known around the world. My grandson tells me that he was in Binghamton and he met the Lubavitcher rabbi there. And he said, perhaps you know my grandfather, my grandson said to him. And he said, I mean Rabbi Blech. And he said, oh, you mean the chassid in camouflage? That's my name now, based on the story that I want to share with you and the idea implicit in the story. I was a rabbi of a shul for many, many years until one day they decided they were going to give me a sabbatical. That was a miracle in and of itself, but it was about a month after that news came out, and I was aware of it, that I get a call from Lubavitcher. Rabbi Groner calls me and says, I hear that you're going on a sabbatical. How he possibly could have known before my parents heard about it, I don't know, but that's the secret message system of Lubavitcher. And he said, the Rebbe wants to see you. I had had no personal relationship with the Rebbe, and I couldn't understand why he wanted to meet with me. Rabbi Groner said, you have a sabbatical coming up. The Rebbe has a mission for you. I said, what kind of a mission? He wants you to go to the Far East, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Tokyo, together with your wife, and spread Yiddishkeit. I am an American rabbi, and in my head, unfortunately, I make a confession. The first thing I said to Rabbi Groner was, look, I'm not really a good fundraiser. My immediate thought was that I would be going to all those places to raise funds for Lubavitcher. And I said, that's not really what I do best of all. And he said, Chas v'sholom. No, everything will be paid for. We want not to make money, but make Jews. And your mission will be to go to all the places that we send you. It turns out I was from a place where there were 10 Jews that I spoke to 10,000 Jews. And for all of them, the mission was simply teach them Yiddishkeit. I asked, tell me, are these people that I will be speaking to religious Jews so that I know I have an audience, I can talk to them? He said to me, not yet, but they will be after you speak to them, Ibn Hashem. I went to meet the Rebbe. This was when he was no longer having yechidus, meeting people individually. And that meeting was a turning point in my life. That meeting, and I saw the eyes, and I felt the heart, and I felt the Kedusha, was incredible, and someday I'll write it up in detail. But the Rebbe then told me what he wanted more specifically, and then my wife and I went for 4 months to all these incredible places where Jews gathered to hear Torah, and miracles happened. Miracles because it is something that the Rebbe understood, and it is the reason why I think that we lived to have the Rebbe in our generation. Now, for the younger people, I say our generation, well, you're just a step beyond. But it's a question. This question should be asked. We are not talking just about a great figure. There are heroes in every decade, in every century, in every millennium, of course. The Lubavitcher Rebbe changed Jewish history. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, I don't have to tell you, was one in a, if you write the history of the Jewish people and who saved it, Lubavitcher Rebbe is one of the very few, the most outstanding. Why were we Zoche? What was our merit to have the Rebbe in our time? And I think the answer is profound on 2 levels. Do not think it is a coincidence that after the Holocaust, and we lost 6 million. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I owe you, and we have to rebuild, and the only way to rebuild is to send a figure who can accomplish that. And the Rebbe came and created the rebirth of Klal Yisrael. There's no doubt. The Holocaust was an event that was one in a, hopefully, ever. The Holocaust and its tragedy is beyond words, but even in terms of numbers, simply numbers, unbelievable. So it required an unbelievable figure to go and recreate in a short period of time at least a goodly portion of that which was lost. There's one other thing. I heard this from the Rebbe, and I heard it from people who heard it from him. And it's a profound insight that you have to hear. Do you know what we have to do and who we have to reach out to? Said the Rebbe, when the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, came in and looked for Jews to murder, to destroy, to create what is now known as the genocide, who they look for? Did they look for Shomer Shabbos? Did they look for people who only drank Chol of Yisrael? Did they look for people who were religious people because they were anxious to get rid of the Jewish religion? Do you know that there were German Jews who lived in Germany and thought that was the solution to everything that was wrong with Jewish history in the past, because in Germany, the people are so civilized, so cultured, nothing can ever happen to us here. And when the Nazis came for Jews to murder, they said, but we're not Jews. We don't. And they made a list of the things they don't do. And some of them said, we're not Shomer Shabbos. And others said, we're intermarried. And others said, all kinds of sins. And it didn't make a damn bit of difference to the Germans, because for them, the answer was, everyone is a Jew. You are a Jew. You were born a Jew. You're a Jew, said the Lubavitcher Rebbe. If that's the case, we have to do that in reverse and say, in terms of gathering Jews together, in terms of preserving ourselves, in terms of recognizing that we have a history and we have a destiny, Wir sind alle Yidden, no matter what our level of observance is, no matter what our background is, no matter whether we wear a yarmulke or a baseball hat or no yarmulke or whatever, it doesn't make a difference, because it didn't make a difference to them, and therefore it makes no difference to us. Wir sind alle Yidden. And that's why Lubavitcher Rebbe sent me to all these places where I met Jews who didn't look like Jews, and many of them didn't act like Jews when I met them. I don't want to take pride in this. Basically, it's a story in Chumash. Basically, you know, when God gave Moshe Rabbeinu the mission of going to the Jewish people and saying, God heard you and he wants to redeem you, Moshe Rabbeinu said something he shouldn't have said. Don't tell me Moshe was perfect. Nobody's perfect. And he had a couple of sins. And this was a sin. Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, Ve'hein lo ya'aminu li. I'm going to come and tell them that God spoke to me and he's going to redeem us and everything will be fine. They will not believe me. Says God to Moshe, Mazeh b'yodecha, what's in your hand? And he says, Mata, a stick. And in the Chumash it says Mazeh as one word, not two, not what is this, but from this. Because what God was saying to him is, from this that is in your hand, a stick, you deserve to be hit. You deserve to be smitten. because you spoke ill of the Jewish people and you said they will not believe. Put your hand into your bosom and pull it out and it will be Mitzorah. What's Mitzorah? Motzi Ra, leprous. You spoke Lashon Hara about the Jewish people. What's such Lashon Hara? I mean, he was afraid they wouldn't believe. Go, in my years, in the 50s, I'm an old man, go, as the Lubavitcher Rebbe did, and tell some people to go to Berkeley and go and teach them about Judaism. Berkeley! Wasn't he woke? Didn't he understand what Berkeley is? The epitome of lack of values, of sexual immorality, of everything. Be'ein lo ya'aminu li. You can't say that. You cannot say that about the Jewish people. Because in the heart, deep down of every Jew, there is Kedusha. You know what the Lubavitcher Rebbe once said? How many Malchus lashes does one get for committing a sin? It says 40. But we don't do 40, we do 39. Why is that? Because 40 is completeness. And no Jew ever sins completely. There's always some good within him. So you do 39. And from the other, the one that you don't give, could come the 40 days that Moshe was up on Har Sinai. The 40 that represents completion, fullness. I plan to write another book. I've written, the correct number is 23 books. And the one book I did not yet write is the book of my travels, where I met Poshet Yidden who didn't even know in some cases they were Jews. And when they heard the message and they allowed themselves to hear it, Shema Yisrael, hear, they turned their lives around. They turned their lives around, and the stories are incredible. So the Rebbe knew what he was doing when he sent me. And I don't take credit, because all I did was help to awaken them. I was the alarm clock. And when I came back, the Rebbe wanted to see me again. And I thought he wanted me to tell him what had happened, give him some review of my trip. I didn't have to do it because the Rebbe knew everything. The Rebbe knew every detail. And the only thing he wanted to do, I shared this with you, was to say to me, you know, first I tell you, Yeshikayach. Second, I tell you that even though you didn't think you were a chassid when I sent you on the mission, you are a chassid in camouflage. So you all know that in the Lubavitch, they call their followers Tzivos Hashem, the army of God. So from now on I say, I was in Secret Service. I don't have the beard. I don't look like a Lubavitcher. But the neshama comes from the fact that I'm a 10th generation rabbi. And Baruch Hashem, I was matzliach. So the Rebbe said to me, is there anything that you need desperately, that you need a prayer for? I said, funny that you should ask. Of course, we all have prayers, and at different times in our lives, they are different. As a matter of fact, I want to say publicly that soon we will go to the Ohel, and my wife and I have special prayers for now in our lives. But we know that this is the place where you go, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu hears these prayers with a different sense, because Ein Zeh Kiyim Beis Elokim V'zeh Shar HaShamayim. This is the gateway to heaven. But the Rebbe says, what do you need? And I say, well, I have, one of my daughters is getting a little older and she needs a shidduch. He says to me, where is she? I said, well, she's sitting in the car outside. Go and get her, I'll wait. I rushed out. When I brought my daughter in, he said to her, this year you will be married. Not only did she get married that year, but it was to the son of a rabbi whom we met because we were on the trip in Australia. Mazel tov, right? The Rebbe's prayer came true, as everything he said and he did was emes liamito shel Torah. So, to have the opportunity to come here to the Ohel, I thank you for having invited me. I thank you for being able to be here. I thank the Rebbe for having allowed me to become the chassid in camouflage. I'm going to do what I ask you to do soon. We are going later, shortly, to the actual holy place. I want all of you, as my wife and I are doing, to think of what we really need. Need, I don't mean in dollars and cents terms. I mean in terms of our lives and fulfillment and creating Jewish homes and achieving the happiness that a Jewish life can bring us. And then go to that holy spot and go to the Rebbe who achieved it for Klal Yisrael and say, please, I also am a chassid in camouflage. Please join that community, which now includes Chabad and Yeshiva University, and say, this will, Mr. Shem, be my miracle as well. Understand you are in a holy place. Make a holy prayer. And please God, Emes Hashem, it will be fulfilled. Amen. Amen.
My good friend Matti was actually correcting me that there were no Chabad houses in the Far East at the time. Is that correct, Rabbi Blech? There weren't Chabad houses. They were regular shuls or Jewish communities. So that's how far the outreach and the extension of the Rebbe's hand was to even organizations and communities outside of standard reach. Thank you very much, Rabbi Blech. We're very appreciative of you participating and joining us today for this special occasion. We're also very lucky to have Professor Dina Rabinovich, who is the Department Chair for Judaic Studies and the Director of the Legacy Heritage Foundation Program at Yeshiva University's Stern College for Women. Previously, Dr. Rabinovich was the Director of Israel Guidance at Yeshiva University High School for Girls in Holliswood and the Assistant Principal at the North Shore Hebrew Academy Middle School in Great Neck. Her honors and awards include the Gross Award for Excellence in Teaching, and the Greenspoon Steinhardt Award for Excellence in Jewish Education. We're very honored to have with us today Professor Dina Rabinovich. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and it's truly a pleasure and privilege to be here this afternoon. Please bear with me. My main point will be different lessons I learned about education from the Rebbe that I apply in my formal role as heading the Jewish Ed major at Stern College. But in order to get there, I need you to travel with me a little bit to understand how I got to these messages and really how I got to be here today. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history, in this case, family history, a little bit about my educational background, and then a little bit about my experiential background, and hopefully by that point it will become clear where I'm getting at. I'm going to begin with something that's going to seem like a non sequitur, but again, my message to you, just bear with me and hopefully it will connect together. So on my way over here, I was coming from Stern's open house, and I went around the corner, literally, to daven mincha at the gevarim of my grandparents. My grandfather was a Rav on the Lower East Side in congregation Ohel Anshe Ilya. And as is a custom, I don't know if it still exists, I don't know that my shul today has one, but at the time, the shuls would come together to get a plot of land at a cemetery. You could see if you look there, you'll see there are two pillars guarding different gateways into different sections, and that's where the people of the community are all buried together. So my grandparents are at the front of it as the Rav and Rebbitzin, and I stopped there to daven mincha. It was very meaningful to me. My grandmother's yahrzeit was about a week ago, and I knew that I was coming now, so I waited and I davened mincha. Okay, total non sequitur. Where is that getting from? Because one of the things I always knew was that my grandfather had smicha from Lubavitcher. As I was checking out some details preparatory to talking with you today, I asked my mother about it because it occurred to me if he had smicha from Lubavitcher, like, how come we're not Lubavitcher? And I learned a couple of things. He not only had one, but two smichas from Lubavitcher, 5 smichas in general. So I thank you for allowing me to learn a little bit more about my grandfather. He was born in 1908, and around the age of 12, people were knocking on the doors in the community where he lived. So that's going to put him around 1920, post-World War I, which is important. They were going around knocking on doors to find young men to train them, to bring them into the yeshiva to learn. Why did they have to go door to door? Because of the war, the yeshivot were disbanded, and there was nobody learning to create a natural pipeline into being a Rav, so they knocked everywhere. My grandfather was in the middle of the family. He was very bright. I am told I have one very, very vague memory of meeting him. He died soon after I was born, when I was about 3. And he was sent to learn, just to show you what could happen with learning experiences. His younger brother went to Israel as one of the aliyot, totally chiloni. So just a little in the family, when you learn about Zionism, like, it was interesting to see how it mirrored in my family. So he was sent to Kovno. He got the first of his smichas there. He got several others along the way, came to New York around 1927 or so, and married my grandmother, and they lived on the Lower East Side. So part of my being here, I think, is homage to that part of the background and who I am. But it doesn't end there. I was born in Detroit. I shouldn't say that my parents met in Berkeley in the 60s. My father was on faculty there already. My mother was going for her doctorate. They were instrumental in my father was instrumental in bringing Rabbi Saul Berman to be the Orthodox rabbi on campus. He was the one who introduced them and married them. So even in Berkeley, there's Torah and there's Jews being born and coming together. So it was very meaningful that the job I'm doing now is one that Rabbi Berman held when I was a student myself. So after they were in Berkeley, my father got a tenure-track position at the University of Michigan, where I was born. And in Detroit, where I lived, I like to say I graduated in the top 12 of my class because, punchline, there were only 12 students in my graduating class. It was a small school, which meant that we had the same teachers year in and year out. So we had Rabbi Weinberg, who was Lubavitch and taught us Navi. He would end one year wherever he ended, and he knew he would have the same students in the fall and picked up. So we made our way through Nevi'im Rishonim in the years high school. And then we had Rabbi Cohen, who was most definitely not Lubavitch. And he taught us Torsha Bal Peh, sometimes Chumash, sometimes Hashkafa, depended on the configuration. We would learn one thing with Rabbi Weinberg and then run into the other room to Rabbi Cohen and challenge, and then we would get the answer and run back to one room. And the way that students like to pit one teacher against the other, these are some of my memories in high school as we're trying to figure out where do we fit in the scheme of things. How are the answers resonating with us, this back and forth, going back and forth? It took me years later. I think part of putting those two together was in preparing my words for today, and I'll get to that in a moment. But part of being in a school when you have the same teachers year in and year out, you get tapped to do other things. So one summer, I was a counselor at Gan Israel in Kalkaska, Michigan. I was 15 years old at the time. I and one of my friends were in charge of the second youngest group, and I first had an education of what it was like to be an outsider. I grew up in a frum household. I went to day school all my life. I should have known what was going on, but it was sometimes like a whole different universe. I'd gone to Bnei Akiva camp previously. Like every morning there would be mifkad. I got used to that. Mifkad at Gan Israel was very, very different. We would line up every morning according to bunk and yell out the 12 psukim. I've been corrected, they're not psukim, some of them are mamarim, but in my mind it was a 12 psukim. We were the second youngest bunk, so Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and it was an unbelievably powerful memory saying these psukim, so much so that I took it for granted as part of who I am, that a few years ago, my sister and I were in Crown Heights. We'd gone into a chocolate store there, and I saw the psukim listed, and it was like, oh, of course I know what they are. My sister's like, what are these doing here? I said, don't you know? And I realized, no, she wasn't with me in camp. She didn't have that experience. But just knowing those mamarim became part of who I am. So one of the things I wanted to share with you are one of those mamarim, and one is something else that appeared during that summer as part of the singing that you do at a girls' camp when you're there for the summer session. So what is the mamarim that resonated with me? I could go through all of them, and they're all very powerful, but the one that stood with me for the longest is the one from Megillah, Daf Vav Amud Bet, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Im Yamar Lecha Adam, Yagati v'lo matzati, al ta'amin. Lo yagati umatzati, al ta'amin. Yagati umatzati, ta'amin. Now, we shortened it. We didn't start with Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. We just went to Yagati v'lo matzati. If you search and you don't find, if somebody says that to you, and this is in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Hanafocha, a second-generation Amora, he was, I guess, a blacksmith. That's what his name is indicating. Somebody says to you, I have searched, but I have not found, don't believe him. I didn't search, but I found, don't believe him. I searched, and I found, Yagati umatzati ta'amin. And after all these years, I was actually trying to see what I could find about these words. What does our Masorah say? So I'm going to share with you some of the things. And again, just this weekend, I was finding out some information. So number one, it could be mentioned in connection with finding who Hashem is, connecting to the pasuk ubikashtem misham. Look that when you're out in Galut, you're going to look for Hashem, et Hashem Elokecha, umatzata. That if you want to search for God, you have to look for him. And if somebody says, I searched but I didn't found, don't believe him. If somebody says, I didn't search but I found, don't believe him. But if you search sincerely and you find, that's what you can believe. So, mitziat Hashem, finding God and who God is. The pasuk can also be in reference to tzedakah, connecting it to a pasuk in Mishlei, Rodef tzedakah v'chesed yimtza chayim tzedakah v'chavod, that if somebody's pursuing charity, he's going to find life, charity, and honor. And this time it's in Baba Batra, but it's another memra by Rabbi Yitzchak, that the more you're going to give into tzedakah, the more you're going to have to give into tzedakah. So if somebody says, I'm not going to have enough, don't believe him. If he says, I have, but I didn't search or do anything for it, don't believe him. But if you search and you find, that's what you can believe him. But the way I think I always understood it these years was not necessarily in the realm of mitziat Hashem, finding Hashem, or of tzedakah, but in the idea of a work ethic, that if you want something, and if you want something to be meaningful to you, yagati, umatzati, ta'amin, you've got to put your hishtadlus in, you've got to put your hard labor in, and only then is it going to become more meaningful to you. I've seen this idea resonating through the world of education in a book by Rafe Esquith called There Are No Shortcuts, or in the language of grit by Angela Duckworth, or in Mindset by Carol Dweck, who are all saying the same thing. You've got to put it in, you've got to be resilient, you've got to keep on trying. I even found it in the words of Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers when he quotes a Chinese proverb, that if you wake up early before dawn in order to plant rice, No one who does that for 360 days a year will fail to make his family rich. It's all about this work ethic. It's all about trying to do whatever you can to make something happen. I found it later on in life. My husband went to Yeshivat Har Etzion and was very influenced by Rav Yehuda Amital, who himself is coming from a Hasidic family, who would go around saying, Ein patentim. Again, there are no shortcuts. You've got to put something in order to get something out. So when I think about the Rebbe and what I can apply into the world of education, which occupies so much of who I am today, that is one lesson I like to give over, and it was formed in my mind during that year as a 15-year-old in camp, Yagata Umatzata Tami. The second influential moment was one of the songs that they would sing. Luckily, because of Kolisha, I can spare you having to sing it. But the words begin, voices were not something that was handed down to the women in my family. Once when the Mittler Rebbe Dov Ber was learning late in the night, Torah and holiness sang in his heart, echoing power and might. This is the beginning stanza of the Crying Baby. I actually still have the mimeographed songbook that I received that summer. It's in my papers somewhere. It was easier to find it on the internet right now. But the story is of such. The Mittler Rebbe was learning. He was learning long into the night, and he did not hear the cry of the baby in the next door room because he was so involved in his learning. It was his father, the Alter Rebbe, who was learning farther away in the house, who heard the child and ran down to comfort the child. And what does he say? He says, and let me just read it. The Alter Rebbe is coming down. Beryl, my son, let me teach you. The cries of a child must reach you, no matter how deep your devotion, no matter how high you may rise. That nobody should cry and you're not going to hear them. You're not in an ivory tower. You're not in a silo. We're all arivim zelazeh. We all have a responsibility one to the other. And that, too, is a message I take into my education classes, and I try to impart to my students who go out themselves to become teachers and mechanchot and morot, that we have to look at each child, basher husham, what they need in order to grow. Whatever they're crying, sometimes they don't know what to say, what's bothering them, and we have to realize that they're crying, that they're telling us something. Sometimes they're putting their head down on the desk and they're misbehaving, and we need to see these as signs and start doing our digging to figure out what's going on in their lives right now that they're not able to tell us. So interestingly, for me, it was the experiences that gave me the formal learning, the different messages. There were others, but for the brevity of time. And it was because of my formal education that I was able to have the experiential education as well. And it was ultimately because of my family that made me want to come here and share it with you today. So I want to, first of all, thank you for allowing me to dig a little bit into my past, and I think also to show how those two different elements resonated with me. I would always think of the running back and forth between the two rooms, but when I think about it now, like, there was such a desire to learn. Yes, there was a little bit of pitting one rabbi against the other, but we were doing it because we were trying to figure out who we were and what the Torah meant to us. And we were going to two role models for whom the Torah meant everything, and hearing from them their answers in order to help us come to terms with who we are as well today. How, in my case, I took what I had gotten from my family, gotten from my teachers, gotten from my experiences to form today that I can share with my students as we go forward. And I guess in the interest of just sharing this and sharing a bracha with all of you, that you too should be able to find your journey from your family, from where you're starting, from the basis and the foundation of who you are, through your formal educational experience and whatever that will be, because all of that is going to help shape your experiences and should all make you open to learning and to growing and developing more. And as Rabbi Blech said, the fact that we're at the Ohel with a YU sign, like, you can learn from everything and everything can fit together if your mind is open up enough, if you're willing to put in the effort. Yagata umatzata tami. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Rabinovich. We are going to be showing a special video presentation of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. Many of us who needs no introduction. His tremendous, influential leadership role in the Jewish community is sorely missed. Several weeks ago, we marked the first Yortzeit of Rabbi Sachs, and as we're going to see in this video, his relationship with the Rebbe was something that was tremendously influential for him to even join the rabbinate, and as a consequence, we have this tremendous gift, who we unfortunately just lost, but through writing, through speeches, and through other avenues as well, we had this special gift given to us by the Rebbe himself, and we are tremendously blessed to have that. So if we can show a video of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs on the monitors over here. Ironically, as you'll see in a second, he's going to apologize for not physically being here with us today, unfortunately, but obviously.
I'm so sorry I can't join you in person on this remarkable gathering to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Gimel Tammuz, when the Rebbe was Nifta. But please accept this message as coming from the heart, because I, like you, have had my life changed by that extraordinary man whose influence today has grown, not diminished, these past 25 years, and lives in the incredible work of the thousands, tens of thousands, of shlichim and shlichot throughout the world, and the hundreds and thousands, maybe even millions, who consider themselves the Rebbe's disciples and continue to live their life in the light of the values that he taught successive generations. I personally think back to 3 moments in my life when my whole life was changed by the Rebbe thinking, reflecting, and telling me that I was being called to a more serious and higher purpose. The first of those was in the summer of '68, when I had my first Yechidus with the Rebbe, when he challenged me to do something about the loss of Jewish students, Jewish commitment in Cambridge University. I had never even thought of a leadership role, and there was the Rebbe urging me to undertake one. It was reflecting on that encounter many years later that I formulated the proposition that good leaders create followers, but great leaders create leaders. And that is exactly what the Rebbe did. He took people and turned them into leaders in the most extraordinary way. It was on that occasion, in the course of a Febreng, when I went to say L'chaim with the Rebbe, because I was just about to go back to London the next day, the Rebbe turned to me in surprise and said, "You're going back?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "I have to go back to university." And he said, "But the Cambridge term doesn't begin until the second week in October. I think you should spend Rosh Hashanah here." It's the most extraordinary thing. I think many people actually saw this exchange. And that is how I came to spend that Rosh Hashanah in 770 and heard the Rebbe blow shofar. Nobody who heard the Rebbe blow shofar will ever forget it, because it was quite unlike any other shofar blowing I ever heard before or since. That was a massive change in my life, and of course I tried to do what the Rebbe asked me to do on that occasion. The next meeting was almost 10 years later, in January 78, when I had been told by people that I should give the Rebbe a list of the options. I wanted the Rebbe's advice as to what career I should pursue. And I said, set it out 1 or 2 or 3. And the Rebbe will tell you A or B or C. And I set out the options. Should I be an economist? Should I be a lawyer? Or should I be an academic philosopher? And the Rebbe, when I finally came into his study in 770, held out the list and said no to A, no to B, and no to C. This was not in the script, I have to say. The Rebbe was prescriptive to the nth degree on that occasion. His instruction to me was that I had to train rabbis, that I had myself to become a congregational rabbi so that people could come and see how I did things, how I gave sermons and so on. And he even told me to change the subject of my PhD, to have something to do with the rabbinate. And he asked me to send him a copy when I had finally completed it. Well, when I came back, I have to say, it was quite an ordeal, because what the Rebbe actually wanted was against the United Synagogue bylaws. You couldn't be a rabbi of a United Synagogue and have some employ elsewhere, in my case, in Jews College, training rabbis. And yet, my own Rav, Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, who would not by anyone, I think, be thought of as a chassid or a Chabadnik, as soon as he heard what the Rebbe had said, he said, okay, since the Rebbe said it, it has to happen. And he phoned up Chief Rabbi Jacobovitz at the time and told him that if it was against the United Synagogue bylaws, the United Synagogue would have to change the bylaws. Rabbi Jacobovitz, in good heart, hearing that this was from the Rebbe, did exactly that and said so to the president of the United Synagogue. And so the Rebbe caused the United Synagogue bylaws to be changed. And that is how I came to be, eventually, head of Jews College and training the rabbinate for Anglo Jewry. And finally, of course, in 1990, when I was faced with the question of whether or not to accept the invitation to become chief rabbi. And I set out the pros and cons and asked the Rebbe, should I accept the offer if it is made? And the Rebbe, without writing a single word, put in the typographical symbol for invert word order. Should I became I should, and that was his answer. If they offer you the position, take it. And then he gave me various instructions as to how I should conduct myself in that office. So at every significant moment in my adult life, the Rebbe was the directing influence. And I think I very humbly feel blessed that we had such a man at such a time. His teachings remain incredibly powerful and very, very important. And I identify this in three ways. Number one, I asked myself for many years, how is it that the Rebbe developed this whole concept of outreach that had never existed ever before in Jewish life? The nearest example was the Smuggler of Moses of Busi, who did a tefillin and mezuzah campaign back in medieval France. But I mean, that's not a real analogy, and it's the only precedent. So how was it that nobody had thought of doing outreach before until the Rebbe came along? And my hypothesis, which is no more than a hypothesis, was that the Rebbe was, with deep faith, trying to do what seems almost impossible to do. The only possible tikkun for the Shoah. If Hitler had tracked down every Jew in hate, he would search out every Jew in love. That was the only force for good, equal to and opposite to the force for evil that was the Holocaust. Now, how enormously relevant that is today, as we see anti-Semitism return to the world, to Europe, to the world. our fundamental response, the Rebbe would be telling us right now, was not just to protest anti-Semitism, but to actively engage in Ahavat Yisrael. Actually to go out and tell Jews, you are loved. We are your family. We are not going to let you go. I think that is a very powerful message. We should have an Ahavat Yisrael campaign that is the equal and opposite to the force of anti-Semitism sweeping the world at this moment. Number two, and this of course determined his approach to me, but it determined his approach to everyone. The Rebbe believed so profoundly in Hashgacha Pratit, in divine providence, that he knew that each one of us has a role, a tachlit, a tafkid, a mission in this life. And that is why we have the gifts we have, and that is what we are here to do. In this, I always sensed a very strong connection between the Rebbe's teaching and the teaching of one of the most influential of all figures in the 20th century, the psychotherapist, the survivor of Auschwitz, called Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl developed, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, a whole school of psychotherapy telling people that we have to find our mission in life. We have to ask not, what do I want from life, but what does life want from me? And as a result, I was very moved to discover that the Rebbe, I'm not sure the Rebbe ever met Viktor Frankl, but did send Viktor Frankl a message to him in Vienna telling him not to despair. Somehow the Rebbe had gathered that Viktor Frankl was despairing of the fact that his whole approach to psychotherapy was not being accepted and was just about to leave Vienna and go to Australia. And it was the Rebbe's encouragement that persuaded him to stay and continue his work. Viktor Frankl's work is regarded as one of the most influential of all in the 20th century. And he had a secular equivalent of what the Rebbe was teaching us. We each have a mission in life, and we have to fulfill that mission. And thirdly, the Rebbe taught us something that I think no other Jew in our time or for a very long time has sufficiently emphasized. There's a difference between Gashmias and Ruchnias in this, that any material goods, the more you share, the less you have. Share £1,000 with 10 other people, you only have a tenth of what you began with. Share total power with 9 other people, you have a tenth of the power you began with. The more you share, the less you have. But when it comes to Ruchnias, to spiritual goods, to love, to knowledge, to influence, the more you share, the more you have. The Rebbe understood that the real antidote to secular society is not segregating yourself behind ghetto walls and never having anything to do with the world or with other Jews who are less religious than you. He understood that the more you share your Judaism with others, the stronger your Judaism will be. I cannot tell you how important that is and how little understood. So those 3 messages of tikkun, of the love that is the antidote to hate, of each of us fulfilling our mission and our responsibility, and of understanding that the more we share our Judaism, the more Judaism we will have. Those are messages that are still as necessary today as they ever were before. And when we do those, the spirit of the Rebbe lives on in us. There's a remarkable midrash in Shemot Rabbah, which says that Moshe Rabbeinu and Shmuel were both equal prophets. Moshe v'Aaron b'chanav Shmuel b'korei Shemo. However, the midrash says Moshe Rabbeinu and Shmuel had a different approach to the way they related to other people. Moshe Rabbeinu sat and expected people to come to him. Shmuel went out from town to town He did a circuit. He went out to the people. He didn't expect the people to come to him. He went out to them. The Midrash tells us that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu had to go to God. God summoned Moshe to come to him. But when it came to Shmuel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu went to Shmuel and stood by Shmuel's side. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loved Shmuel because he engaged in outreach. I'm not sure that the Midrash is telling us that Shmuel was necessarily a greater prophet than Moshe Rabbeinu, but he was telling us that going out and reaching out means that God reaches out to us and holds us close. May we live by the Rebbe's teachings. May we, by our deeds, keep his spirit alive. And may we be grateful that we had the privilege of knowing one of the greatest leaders the Jewish people has ever known.
So Rabbi Ephraim Mintz is I'm going to give an introduction, if that's okay, Rabbi Mintz, is the founding executive director of the Rohr Jewish Learning Institute, the largest institute of adult learning of its kind, providing educational offerings in over 1,000 chapters across the globe. He directs a vibrant network of educational departments for teens, university students, women's studies, Talmud study, online learning, and continuing professional education. We are tremendously honored to have a friend of mine, Rabbi Mintz.
Thank you, Rabbi Hirschel. I'm going to be very brief and get straight to the point. I just want to, Rabbi Blech, after hearing you describe the coming together of the logo and this meeting, I think we have a name for the event next year, Rabbi Hirschel. The Kinus, the Conference for the Secret Service Members of Chabad. So we know after hearing Professor Rabinovich, Rabbi Blech, and the others address us and the remarks heard by Rabbi Ray Sachs, just to summarize, we know that the leaders of Klal Yisrael, the great tzaddikim, are referred to as Einei Ha'eda, the eyes of the nation, and there are various reasons why they're given this title. I would like to suggest that today's meeting, today's coming together at the Ohel, perhaps, is Einei Ha'eda because we are going to be standing momentarily in the presence, the burial site, the Ohel of the Rebbe, and we're taught that the burial site of a tzaddik, a part of his spirit, of his nefesh, is present there. So essentially, we will be standing in the presence of the Rebbe's spirit. And when we do so, we will be having the opportunity to see ourselves through the lens of the Rebbe. As we heard speaker after speaker address the fact that the Rebbe did not, nor does he see us the way we see ourselves. The Rebbe, the great tzaddikim throughout history, they see ourselves, they see us, they see a fellow Jew by their neshama self, by their enormous potential. As the Rabbi put it so well earlier, with all the Wi-Fi, it's all lit up, reaching and rising to our fullest potential. Unfortunately, sometimes individuals could live a life never realizing, never tapping into, never leveraging, never taking advantage of their true and fullest self. What a pity. Today, the youngsters you're at a point of your life. You need not wait until you're in your senior years to meet a Chabad Shliach or a Chassid visiting you in Thailand, trying to kindle your neshama. You're in a place that you could see yourselves through Einei Ha'eda, through the eyes of a tzaddik, through the eyes of the Rebbe, being the presence of the Rebbe. You know, Noach, one of the great tzaddikim, Rashi says he didn't believe, right? He didn't believe the Mabul was about to come. The holy tzaddik of Barditchev says, how could we say that Noach didn't believe? Every child believes. He said, of course he believed in God. However, he did not believe in himself. He did not believe that he had the capacity, the ability to inspire a generation to return and reconnect. So when we fail to believe in ourselves, we also, by extension, fail to believe in Hashem, in God. So in the moment when we sit down, we're about to sit down, take a few moments to write what's known as a PAN, an acronym for a Pidyon Nefesh, a note. And I'll just give you some of you have been here before, those who haven't. The custom is, number one, to write your name and your mother's name. Those who wish to, when you enter the Ohel, those who wish to light a candle, you can do so. Those who wish to wash your hands prior to doing so. And when we come into the Ohel, there's a section of the prayer book there, Man Elashon, which will say, and shortly thereafter, after a few pages, there's a moment where you would read your note and put it, and the custom is to tear it and to put it on the very resting place on the Ohel. When you write, as we heard so beautifully earlier, this is your moment to write from your neshama. Ask for, as we heard, not for dollars and cents, you can ask for that too, but ask for what your neshama desires and requires. Have in mind your loved ones, your family, those who perhaps might need a special blessing. And after you leave the Ohel this evening, tell them that you prayed for them. Chazal tell us when you give a gift to a fellow, you should tell that person that you had them in mind. That in itself will bring half the bracha. When you tell a person you prayed for them, but pray for them, for your families, but most equally importantly for yourself, because this is an opportunity that we will be connecting with our innermost, our truest neshama self, and most importantly, we will be taking that neshama self back with us, that candle back with us, that spirit back with us. And as the nature of every candle, it illuminates, it doesn't remain selfish, but it illuminates, it inspires, it uplifts all those around it. There's also, I want to mention many have the custom to not to wear leather shoes. You can switch before if you choose to do so, and to write, again, anything you feel. This is between you and the Rebbe and you will walk it out together. Rabbi Herschel, you'll tell them how we're...
So what we're going to do is we're going to walk together as a group, and I'll lead the group, if that's okay, along with Rabbi Mintz, and we're going to go to the first set of tables at the first tent that's right at the beginning, where a lot of people were dropped off. So that's where we're going to go together as a group right now. One last quick note. Before you leave tonight, please take the booklets we made for you. Hannah Libero is over here. She's going to put her hand up. She's one of the student leaders. She has a bunch of booklets for everyone to take home with beautiful logos on the back for all of Yeshiva University, as well as Sichos in English. That was Rebbe Afson's doing. Thank you so much. And we're going to take a journey together to the first tent. Thank you so much. Mincha, for those who need to daven mincha, there are minyanim over here.